Welcome to On the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phil and Nick Stevens. We're coming to you live on Monday night for those watching the live stream. But last week, we did an interview with Ben Badler of Baseball America, which will be part of tonight's episode when is released on whichever platforms you listen to your podcasts. So be sure to check that out probably either later tonight, so later Monday night or early on Tuesday to see the full episode, including Ben's interview, where we discussed the Orioles' latest international signing efforts, got into the depth of their farm system, and even talked a little bit about the 2022 draft and who the Orioles might take with that first overall pick. We really appreciate Ben coming on the show. He gave us some excellent insight. And I'll just start with Nick. Coming off that interview, what are your thoughts really about the international efforts as you hear them from Ben Badler about how they've changed since Mike Elias and Kobe Perez took over?
Yeah, he didn't really have a word to describe the change, right, that's taken place in the system. It was really cool to hear his perspective, someone that's so well connected with on the international side of things. I just think the one point specifically that really stood out, and I hope people heard this point loud and clear. If not, I want to reiterate it that when we asked him about who are some of the sleepers in the system, talking about some of the depth as far as international talent is concerned, he talked about the pitching, and he highlighted a lot of pitchers, and he seemed really intrigued by some of the young international pitching prospects the Orioles have, which I thoroughly enjoyed hear him talk about that and highlight that. So it's almost like there might actually be some pitching depth in the system, something about a cupboard. But yeah, fantastic interview. Really loved having Ben on, and hopefully we can get him on again to talk about the system, especially as we continue to go deeper and deeper down the international hole here.
Yeah, honestly, it was probably one of the most insightful interviews I think we've done. I greatly enjoyed it. Hopefully everyone checks it out. We'll get it out in the podcast tomorrow and on YouTube later this week. But for me, the big thing that stood out was I now have a firm pick of who I want the Orioles to take at 1-1, whereas going into the interview, I was like, I could see it being any of these six. No, I know who I want now, and I'm sure you'll know who that is since you're probably just got done listening to it. But Tamar Johnson, let's go.
Ben definitely increased my enthusiasm for Tamar Johnson there. And it does feel like that rare mixture of skill set, 70 hit tool, potential 70 power, and a good defender somewhere on either side of the second base bag. I'm very excited to see what Johnson does this spring to possibly improve his draft stock. So definitely on my radar. Going back to the international efforts, I thought he had the most nuanced perspective I've heard in the last few years on how the international efforts from the Orioles have evolved, which is that they are still paying the price to an extent for the lack of activity they had for a long time, by the fact that there's not a lot of depth out of the international markets towards the top of the farm system. But when you get to the bottom, you start to see a lot more. And, as the organization progresses over the next 2 or 3 years, you're going to see those players rise towards the top of the farm system. And this is a peat that we've made a few times in a new year, and I'll make it again. Really watch Delmarva this season, because I think that's going to be your first big taste of players like Raul Rangel, Misael Deson, Moises Chase, Moises Ramirez. So Delmarva this year, I think, is going to be a sign of things to come for the Orioles.
Yeah, I think we have a question about that later on, and we can really dive into just how much that international flavor is going to be in Delmarva, at least to begin the year, and hopefully move up to Aberdeen as the season goes on.
Yeah, and I think a lot of Orioles fans who pay attention to this understand that this is only year 3. So when these kids are signing so young, you're making those connections when they're 13, 14 years old. When we had Kobe Perez on, he was talking about Thomas Sosa, how they connected when he was 13 years old. This is unfortunately, we don't know a lot of the dark side that goes on that side of the baseball, but it's going to take the Orioles a couple more years before they really rein in those top level elite international prospects. But right now, I think what you're seeing is this system really trusts their international scouts and finding those diamonds in the rough, that maybe they're only going to cost $150,000, but can they develop that Raul Rangel? Can they develop that type of pitcher and turn him into a top 30 prospect? And so far, I think this year at least is going to answer a lot of those questions about how they can develop those kind of players, because like you mentioned, a lot of them are going to be stateside and full season ball this year for the first time.
Yeah, absolutely. And we really appreciated Ben's insight. We thank him again for coming on the show. And usually we take some time out during all of our episodes to welcome new members of our Patreon community, which we have here for On the Verge. We appreciate their support, and we're going to shout out our new members. I'll turn that over to Bob, as well as a returning member, I believe.
Yeah, welcome back, Brandon Stoneberg. Nice to have you back in the fold. We also have Kenneth DiPietro as a new patron, and Keith Mayo. Last name sounds familiar, but I'm sure it's no relation whatsoever.
Well, welcome to the new members of our community, and welcome back, Brandon. We appreciate your support. We'll move in now to listener questions. We've been pushing this out there for the last week or so as a complement to our interview with Ben Badler. And we'll start off with one of the points that Ben Badler brought up, which is Tamar Johnson is the number one pick. We have a good question here from a listener named Logan. Did you guys have a prospect over the past few years that you were all in on, but were disappointed the Orioles didn't take him when they could have? And I'll start with Bob on this.
I had a hard time coming up with this just because, honestly, as much as I can rag on the Orioles, drafting and player development over the past 10, 20 years, they honestly have taken a lot of the guys that I wanted. I was worried they weren't going to take Matt Wieters. They took Matt Wieters. I was worried they wouldn't take Manny Machado. They took Manny Machado. Same with Dylan Bundy. I wanted Kevin Gausman at the time. Even Nick Markakis, I was excited about when that happened, even though I didn't know if he would be a pitcher or a hitter. But Matt Hobgood was definitely not the guy to take, what was it, number 4 overall or something like that. So I can't remember who I wanted, but I guarantee it wasn't Matt Hobgood. So that's what I'm going to go with.
Well, I'll jump in here because Hobgood was my answer too. And Hobgood was chosen 5th overall. And I remember actually watching the 2009 draft, and Tony Sanchez went to the Pirates to pick before that. And I knew the Orioles were not going to take Tony Sanchez. So it's like, wow, the board's wide open now. They can pretty much have, their pick of players. And they went with Matt Hobgood, which felt like a reach to me at the time. And we now know that the 2009 draft was the year that the entire league missed on Mike Trout, or almost the entire league. But even if you take Mike Trout out of the equation, here's some of the players that were available to the Orioles that went in the first round. Zach Wheeler went to the Giants with the next pick. Mike Minor went 2 picks later. 3 picks later was Mike Leake. A.J. Pollock went in the middle of the first round to the Diamondbacks. Any of those players would have been great to have had. Can you imagine Mike Leake in the Orioles rotations from 2012 to 2014? Mike Minor or Zach Wheeler in the rotations at any point? Imagine just briefly if there had been an outfield of A.J. Pollock, Adam Jones, and Nick Markakis for the Orioles. It's just a lot of possibilities just got left there with that pick.
God, instead of that rotating cast of left fielders along with them, that would have been nice.
Yeah, it's something that I really enjoy doing. It kind of hurts a lot of times looking at that Matt Hobgood example specifically about what could have been when you look at old draft lists. But yeah, I can't go back that far. I was not into college baseball and the MLB draft scene up until only about 2 or 3 years ago, just because, the NFL draft, you see results instantly. You see those first round picks in the starting lineups. NBA draft, these guys can become stars within the first couple weeks of the season. And, baseball, not like that. So this is a much more recent thing for me. I can look ahead already at 2023, 2024. I've got some names that I'm already high on, watching so much college baseball last year, that I hope that there is a future marriage between them and the Orioles down the road. And so in 20 years from now, when we're still doing this podcast, hopefully, I've got some good names that I think are going to be on that list. But yeah, last year, I think if I go more recently, I can just say, I hope I don't go back a couple years from now and my answer is Khalil Watson, because I got really high on Khalil Watson last year. Sam Bachman out of Miami, Ohio. I had a weird thing here with a Mac SB Nation blog when I was writing about Mac baseball for a year, and I fell in love with Sam Bachman. Hopefully those 2 names don't come back to bite me. But yeah, college baseball is definitely a fun adventure though. And I love that we are getting more and more into this draft. Fans are getting more and more involved with the MLB draft. And it's not just those first round guys. We're going deeper and deeper and deeper. People get angry when we don't do 3 days draft recaps anymore. That's how intense this is getting. So it's fun to look back though.
Yeah, if you look at the more recent stuff, I'd say 2020, I was fine with Kerstedt, but I was kind of getting excited for the Zach Veen rumor, taking the high school outfielder #2, but he's looking pretty good, but we'll see what Kerstedt can do this year. Moving on to the next question. It comes from Vivek, past guest of the show. Once Adley, Grayson, and even DL graduate, is there a prospect in the Orioles system that can challenge for top 10 overall in baseball? He's considering Kobe Mayo, Cowser, Gunnar Henderson. Can you guys imagine all three of them taking a step forward even more, ending the year in AA/AAA? Let's go with Nick.
Top 10 overall. DL Hall has been getting some of those talks, in the last couple of weeks from over at Baseball America, looking ahead. But I am going to say among that group, I'm going to say Kobe Mayo could be in that conversation. I think the national hype around him continues to grow. And when you hear national writers talk about Mayo, it's always like, even Ben Badler had this kind of the same reaction. There's some swing and miss in his game, so we got to see what he can do against, better pitching. But actually, he didn't strike out that much in 2021. Like, that's exactly the point here. Like, he's going to continue to fill out physically. There's so much more power in that bat. He's so young. If he can continue to limit the strikeouts, I mean, the ceiling is extremely high with Kobe Mayo. So, and as far as how will they end the season, I think Mayo and Cowser could end the year in AA. And I think Henderson is in AAA within a few weeks of turning 21 years old. And he turns 21 at the end of June. So,
yeah, I agree with Nick. I think that Mayo and Cowser definitely are strong candidates to end the year at AA, and Henderson could end the year at AAA. As far as top 10, I think Henderson would get there first of anyone because Mayo right now is kind of just on the outside looking in on top 100 list, whereas Henderson's kind of falling in the middle of the pack somewhere. And I feel like a big year between AA and AAA would push him into the top 10. Whereas Mayo, I could see this time next year, he's maybe top 50 to top 75. And then 2024 is when you take that big step forward. Colton Cowser, I think it's really just going to be a matter of silencing some of the doubts about his power because everything else is there. The home run power, I think, is a big question, but everything else is there. So those three would definitely be in the mix. And then obviously whoever the Orioles take 1-1 in 2022 is going to have to be in that conversation as well. But we're so far out from that it's hard to know who that's going to be.
Yeah, exactly. If Tamar Johnson is a 70-70 guy, I mean, he could very well compete for that top 10. But I just saw a tweet, can't remember if it was today or yesterday, from Prospects Live, who they did their Orioles top 10 or top 30 list. And Will Hofer has a quote. It was posted it was tweeted out from Twitter as well. They have Kobe Mayo #6, just like us. They have great taste. And they said, this is someone that could very well be the best offensive prospect in baseball in a year's time. So they would go with Kobe Mayo there. Hard to disagree. I think Cowser, he won the distance competition at one of the instructs that they just did. So if he's adding some muscle and some power to that frame and he can continue to hit like 330 and add 20-25 home run power, that's pretty damn good. And Gunnar, I mean, God, he's, like Nick said, he could be barely 21 and in AAA with his power. These guys could definitely make a run for that top 10 type stuff, but as long as they keep improving and, the competition between themselves pushes them to get better and better, we'll be in good hands.
Yeah. I just think with Cowser, I'm trying to figure out like how to say this best without it coming off as like cold or mean or like I'm down on him, which I'm absolutely not. I just think he's almost like too safe in a sense. Like how high is his ceiling really? I think overall he does everything really, really well. But does anything really super stand out? Is that ceiling there to push him into like a top 10? That's the thing. That's my thought of what could probably hold him back, but I don't know. Maybe that's just me. But great prospect. Another question from Vivek. Which international players do you guys believe will start the year in Delmarva? We'll start with Zach.
I've talked about this a little bit a few minutes ago, and I would also refer back to our first show of 2022 when we dug into Bob's projected rosters. I think the names we mentioned, Moises Ramirez, Moises Chase, Raul Rangel, Misael De Son, all are pretty likely to be at Delmarva to start the year. So I'd look for them, but I would throw Luis Ortiz's name into the mix at this point as well. Kobe Perez praised his stuff when he was on our show a couple weeks ago, and the numbers at the Florida Complex League last year don't look great because they weren't, but it was also sort of a small sample size. There was an outing in there where he was actually hit hard by the Orioles' other FCL team, and that drove the numbers up a little bit. So that's not entirely to blame, but that was part of it. So I think if there's someone that is maybe off the radar a little bit right now for a low A assignment on opening day that gets it, I would go with Luis Ortiz, a left-handed pitcher with promising stuff who, maybe the Orioles feel like is ready for that challenge.
I wrote down a list of 13 players that I think could start at Delmarva, just going through the prospects, and it's pretty exciting. You got Cesar Prieto, who I think he could probably start higher, but like we talked about last week, he might get that, like just a cup of coffee in Delmarva to get his feet wet. You got Michel Deson, Luis Ortiz, I agree with you, Zach. Steven Acevedo, chance he starts back in the FCL, but very well, depending how he looks in the spring, could start in Delmarva. Rael Rangel, Isaac De Leon, Moises Ramirez, Moises Chase, Brian Hernandez, the catcher, Davis Tavares, Isaac Bellany, Jose Cruz, and Nolberth Romero. So, I mean, let's go. That's pretty exciting.
Yeah, that's the list. I don't have anything new to add to that list because that's pretty extensive. Juan De Los Santos, I don't know if you guys mentioned that name. He's somebody that's a big guy. I like these big bodied, broad shoulder pitchers. And Juan De Los Santos is one of those guys. I'm excited to see if we get to see him in Delmarva next year. But yeah, I was going to see is the Mad Behemoth in the chat tonight? Because Jose Cruz or Josue Cruz, I'm going to nickname him the Mad Behemoth. I know the numbers weren't great, but that guy's 6'4", 6'5". I think he's only listed 175 when I looked, but there's no way he can add another 50, 75 pounds easy. And that swing, when I'm watching his batting practice videos, my wife gets concerned and I have to stop because they are beautiful swings. So I can't wait to see that swing in Delmarva.
So turning our attention now to the Major League Orioles. This comes from Logan. Do you think that Hyde is just a placeholder manager, or is he going to stick around for when we're competitive? And I'll start with Nick on this one.
I don't know. I mean, I don't really know how we're supposed to provide an honest assessment of how Brandon Hyde's done because he's been given kind of a crap roster over these last couple of years and been put in this impossible spot. But I think guys fight for him. He fights for his guys. Literally, he will fight you for his guys. I don't think he's a long-term answer, but I'm a fan of Hyde wherever he ends up, whatever role he ends up. But I'm coming around more and more to this idea that is Buck Britton the future manager in waiting? Is that the plan? Because you have so many. He's a former player in the system, and you have so many guys like Adley Rutschman, Grayson Rodriguez, Gunnar Henderson. You have all these guys who vouch for him and speak so highly of him. Other coaches in the system who speak so highly of him. I just wonder: are we looking at a future Orioles dugout with Buck Britton, Ryan Fuller, Justin Ramsey, and some others, and bringing that magic back to Baltimore? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure what to make. I think what they might do is give him every chance, every opportunity to be the guy. Obviously, I think it doesn't matter the last 3 years, whatever. I think starting maybe this year and next year, they'll give him just to see what he can do with these young guys coming up, see if he meshes well with the young coaches they want to bring up and the players. And maybe Buck Britton will be the bench coach at some point to kind of even get more experience in the Major League dugout. And we know Justin Ramsey will eventually be up on the Major League staff. We got Ryan Fuller already. They're going to bring in their guys. I think they're going to see how it meshes. And Buck Britton does seem like a slam dunk to be a Major League coach or manager at some point, but you never know. If it's not Brandon Hyde, they might go outside and get someone more experienced too. So I think they'll give him the chance, but it's impossible to say right now because he's basically just been managing a AAA team.
Yeah, I feel like managers really across the league have gotten harder to evaluate because of, how front office driven the game is now. But in the case of Hyde, I kind of agree with Nick. I like the fact that he fights for his players. I think he says all the right things publicly. As far as his in-game strategy, I can't tell you whether or not he's a good manager because he doesn't have a good roster to work with. He has, over the last few years, one of the worst rosters in the league to work with. So it's really hard to evaluate. I do think he'll be given some opportunity to guide this team into contention, and we'll see where that goes. I did have this thought, though, when I saw this question. I'm going to throw this out there. This is a general, gauge on where baseball is right now. If Bob Melvin gets the Padres to play to the level that they should have last year, is that going to sort of maybe upend the idea of putting a new manager in charge of a team that needs to take that step forward and contend? Because he's coming in after Jace Tingler, who, lasted 2 years and completely collapsed in the second half last year.
It's actually a really good question. And that's a deep one to think about because, yeah, I know Tingler's issue with San Diego, from what I know, is that he just lost the clubhouse completely. And some of that might have been because of Eric Hosmer, but he did not have the respect of that clubhouse. And so you wonder, we've said before, the Orioles are not planning to have a championship team full of homegrown prospects, as much as some people think that's the case. But we all know that's not going to happen. They're going to bring in free agents. They're going to make those trades. So as much as it's cool to think about, could Buck Britton and Fuller and Ramsey and some of these minor league instructors form that nucleus, that coaching circle in the big leagues to mesh well with the guys coming up in the system? At the same time, is that going to work with a bunch of these veterans the Orioles bring in? Or would it be better to bring in a veteran like the Padres are doing with Bob Melvin? So it's actually a pretty interesting question. And now I'm going to follow the Padres even more next year and see how that relationship works.
Yeah, but then how far do you go? Would it be the manager, or would it be just like, hey, they had another year to gel and get experience, and that's a lot of new players brought in to play on the same team in the first year, so maybe they just had more time to, I don't know, get some clubhouse chemistry and all that stuff. So you can just go back and forth forever, but it's definitely an interesting question for sure.
Yeah, and I feel like we've also seen a trend now of managers who weren't successful the first time around being more successful. Their next stop, AJ Hinch, that happened with Gabe Kapler, did that with the Giants last year. So the manager that takes the Orioles to that next step might not be the obvious answer right now. And I'll go to a question here from Simpkin Tribute. Will Buck adopt analytics with the Mets, referring to Buck Showalter? I'll get Bob's thoughts on this first.
I mean, he always talks about how, I am open-minded. I do like analytics, but I think I saw John Shepard tweet out at some point that, yeah, he likes the analytics that agree with his gut instincts, and throws out the rest. But hey, if he gets fully on board, maybe he's the guy. 4 more years, bring him home, and we'll do it again.
Even if he were to adopt the analytics, I don't think it's going to help the Mets because the Mets are the Mets. So I feel bad for him. I hope the Mets win. I want to see Buck win. I love Buck, but that's going to be a tough job for him.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment.
All right, let's go to another question from Justin, talking about a trade that maybe could help spring things at the major league level. Would you consider a trade centered around Gunnar Henderson to the Marlins for Sandy Alcantara? Or at least maybe to take it a little bit further, would you consider trading a guy like Gunnar Henderson for a pitcher, that's not fresh, but he's got a couple years of experience, he's got some success, and he's young enough to pitch for a few more years? Let's go with Zach.
Sure. I mean, I would consider it. Alcantara's got what could turn out to be a pretty team-friendly deal with the Marlins right now. My initial reaction was to go look at Alcantara's home run fly ball rates, his xFIP, to see if maybe he was aided by playing in Marlins Park a little bit. And that really was not the case in 2021. We kind of saw the numbers neutralize a little bit. So I think what you see is what you get. I just still, in my mind, if Gunnar Henderson is what we think he could be, what his ceiling is, you don't trade that kind of player for a pitcher that has a few years under him, I don't think. But right now, I would consider it, yeah.
From an Orioles perspective, possibly. From the Marlins perspective, though, I think they just gave him that contract extension, if I read that correctly, like 5 years, $50+ million. So yeah, it is team friendly, but the Marlins just dished out that money to him, and I didn't do a deep look at the Marlins roster, but I feel like they have to be ready to contend in the NL East. If not now, I don't know when they're going to, but I feel like that's a roster that could compete. So I don't see why they would make that move, even though they're pitching. Also, off the top of my head, I could be wrong here as well, but I feel like their pitching is also pretty deep. So if you want to look to trade for pitching, the Marlins could be a good franchise. But yeah, I think broadening it out, if trading Gunnar Henderson for a starting pitcher, an established veteran starting pitcher, I would say absolutely. But first, like, show me next offseason, not right now. I'm not trading Gunnar Henderson right now for a starting pitcher because what's that going to solve? But next offseason, and I haven't looked at who's possible free agents are going to be next offseason, but sign a proven veteran, a third baseman or shortstop to bring in, then sure. Then trade Gunnar Henderson for a starting pitching prospect who can be in the top 3 in a major league playoff rotation. I'm 100% fine with that, but not right now.
Yeah, I was going to make that same exact point. Like, what is the Sandy Alcantara going to do for the Orioles right now in 2022, right? So, yeah, if I would definitely consider it, and maybe this time next year or a year and a half from now, I think that's definitely an option depending on, what's Westberg doing, how's Kobe Mayo looking, and like you said, yeah, sign someone so you're not relying on a Gunnar Henderson coming up and coming right out of the gates hot to be successful. So yeah, I think I'm in agreement with you guys completely.
Another Patreon question from Robert says, do we have a chance at the title in AA? Bob?
Of course. I mean, let me look at our roster, projected roster. Look at this. I mean, Henderson, Ortiz, Reiser, Haskins, DL Hall, Drew Rom. That's to start the season. I mean, I don't know. I think it's going to be, look what they did last year. And it wasn't like the opening day roster for AA wasn't like loaded with our top 20 talent or anything. So yeah, I definitely think we'll be right in the mix. We got a deep, talented farm system and a lot of the top guys are starting there. So I think so.
Yeah, the outcome of the minor leagues can be incredibly hard to predict for so many different reasons. With that being said, yeah, if I were a Bay Sox fan, I'd be feeling pretty good about the chances of my team being competitive because the opening day roster is going to be pretty good. And I think that's even if you end up in a situation where Jordan Westbrook starts at Norfolk, that's still going to be a really good team. And there's a lot of talent in Aberdeen to start next year. So they're going to have plenty of opportunities to get, players up from the lower levels that help them as, the Westbergs, the Hendersons, DL Hall, Joey Ortiz inevitably move up. There's going to be a lot of talent behind them.
Yeah, I think that early season roster is definitely going to be stacked. I would be more concerned about what does that roster look like at the end of the year, because I think a lot of the pitching staff, I was doing some like early look aheads, looking at Aberdeen's roster and where guys are at. I don't know if Bowie's going to get that Drew Rom, Jordan Westberg, Gunnar Henderson influx at the end of the year to help propel them into a championship. But, there are a lot of pitchers like Zach Peak, Brandon Young, Noah Denoyer, Jake Lyons. You're going to see a lot of those guys come up from Aberdeen to Bowie and in the year in Bowie. And I said last week, a couple weeks ago, when we were talking about the coaching assignments, Josh Conway, the new pitching coach in Bowie, I think he's going to be a star this year. And so I'm anxious to see what he can do with the pitchers on that roster. And we got the comment here, Kyle Moore is going to take this team to a championship. You have a rising head coach, manager, and Kyle Moore there as well. Title, sure. But I'm more interested to see, do guys that come up from Aberdeen take those big leaps like we saw last year when they made that jump? And I think if they do, then we've got some more future coaching studs on our hands out here in the minor leagues.
You left off one name on that pitchers that'll end the year in AA. Gene Pinto, baby. That's
okay,
match made in heaven. Title. That's it. He's going to put the foot down on the championship.
All right. If it's game 5 of the AA, what is it, AA Eastern League, whatever it is now.
Whatever they're called.
Yeah. If it's game 5 of that championship series and Gene Pinto's on the mound, it's a lock. Bowie's got the ring.
That's about as good of a prediction I think we can make right now on February 7th. So here's an interesting question from Tom. What do they do to eliminate tanking? A lottery draft. And I'll start with Bob here. So this is referring to MLB and part of the never-ending CBA discussions and the prospects of a draft lottery being instituted.
All right. So No, I'm not the commissioner. I don't know what they're going to do. They got to do something because, I think a lottery draft will probably help. I think there's been some convoluted proposals out there as far as like you can only have a top 5 pick twice, 2 years in a row. Other than that, and small market, big market, they got to do put their heads together and do something. I think it's in the best interest of both parties in this case. So I don't know.
Yeah. I kind of the same answer, Tom. Like, I just don't know. I feel like if there was a good answer, then hopefully we still wouldn't be in this lockout February 7th. Something definitely does have to happen. I know there's talk of salary floor, but I don't think that's going to happen at all. We've mentioned before, if there's a salary floor, that just means that Jordan Lyles is going to get $25 million from a team like the Orioles who aren't prepared to compete. It's just not something I really worry about, honestly. Like, I just want to watch baseball. I know there are big issues, and we don't want another Orioles team doing this. We don't need 8 teams because last year's All-Star break, coming out of last year's All-Star break, weren't there only 10 teams that were actually competing? Like, the league doesn't need that, but at the same time, I have no idea how to fix this, and I think that's the issue, that players and owners don't know how to fix this either.
Yeah, based on the reports we were hearing about the CBA in recent weeks, my sense was kind of that the draft lottery is on the table and might be inevitable, but that the two sides can't agree on the scope of it, and that maybe I'm thinking rationally, which I'm not sure they are, but maybe rationally the thing to do would be just to put that issue off for another 5 years and revisit it when you get these more contentious points out of the way. But as far as the draft lottery goes, I was actually looking into this a little bit, and the NBA, which I don't follow, so I had to bring myself up to speed on this, but you heard 76ers tanking, back in the previous decade. The one thing that a lot of NBA writers that I read, especially over at SI.com and The Ringer, shout out to both of them, that they thought reversed some of the trends of tanking was flattening the lottery odds. Whereby the top pick or the team with the worst record didn't have the highest percentage of the top overall pick. Instead, the teams with the 3 worst records had the same odds, and the team with the worst record could fall as low as 5th in the draft. So I say that because the NBA is a sport where the draft has a much more immediate impact and where a rebuild can happen a lot faster. And in baseball, I think you're going to have to pair a draft lottery with a lot of other elements. You're going to have to pair it with eliminating service time manipulation. You're going to have to solve, the luxury tax, the salary floor, if that's even in play. There's a lot of things that are going to have to go in conjunction with it. So I think it could help, but on its own, it's not going to be part of the solution. I also don't know, given the development timetable for these players, is it realistic to get rid of a rebuild that is shorter than 3 years? I agree that 5 and 6 years is a lot, but is it realistic to cut it down to more than 3?
My only thing with the draft lottery, and there is that idea, well, if it's a lottery, you're not guaranteed. If you have the worst record, you could end up with the 4th pick in the draft. I got the 2020 draft rankings. We were talking about it before we came on the air. I got the 2020 draft results right here. And all right, so the Orioles don't get the number 2 pick. They get the number 4 pick. Oh, darn. We got Asa Lacy or, Austin Martin, which I know, knowing what we know now, that could be a different answer. But going into that 2020 draft, I would have been completely fine with those guys too. So, is that still going to deter teams from tanking?
Actually, with the 4 pick, we probably would have taken Heston Kjerstad. So
That's
what difference would it make, right?
Bad example there.
So I got the answer. It's expand the league, 32 teams, 32 team playoffs. There's no such thing as tanking anymore. That's it.
I will add, this is a programming note, that Dr. Stephen Loftus is joining us next week. And I have already talked to Stephen, and one of the things we are going to discuss during his interview is the prospect of a draft lottery. And that's someone who's worked on a draft before from the inside with the Tampa Bay Rays. So I know that he'll probably have some really in-depth answers for us there.
For sure.
But that'll be good. And Sim contribute. Yeah, sorry. I was just I threw this up here because it reminded me of something I actually listened to on Ben Badler's podcast Future Projection, which everyone should check out, is under slot strategy a factor? And they were talking about on there how with the international draft most likely coming, it's going to be looks like it's going to be hard slots where if you draft this person in this slot, this is how much you pay them flat out. So, and they were talking about how that could eventually, if it shows to be successful, that could translate to the amateur draft as well. So, yeah, I think that might be something you have to do if you do a lottery, because then, like we just talked about, the Orioles would get their person pretty much no matter what, because they were doing the under slot strategy, or I don't know. It's definitely a factor, I think.
Yeah,
Now
I
let's
can see it.
okay.
Yeah, I could definitely see it as a factor.
I like this question from Hunter Davis. How would y'all rank the Orioles minor league uniforms? Let's go with Nick.
This is a question I thought a lot about because it's pretty easy, though. The Norfolk Tides green tops are my absolute favorites currently in the system right now. Nothing's going to ever match like their jerseys from like 20 years ago. The wavy T logo, the blue, but I know we're not going back there. So the Tides green jerseys, I love those. Buoys, the Ghost Crabs, Chesapeake Ghost Crab jerseys, those are awesome. Those are probably my number 2. The Norfolk Tides home whites with the green outline, I love those. As you can see, there's a Norfolk bias there, but I'd put them number 3. Then Norfolk jerseys again, the Parijitos de Norfolk, the orange pants got to go, but I like those jerseys. We need more Norfolk coffee jerseys. Bring those back. Then give me the Delmarva Scrapple. Put them on my list. I do like that. That's unique. Then I put Delmarva's regular jerseys and then Bowie's last. I did not put Aberdeen on my list only because I need to see him on the field first. But I think Aberdeen jerseys could land 2 or 3 on my top 5, top 10 list there.
I actually am intrigued by what Aberdeen did this offseason with their uniforms, particularly the powder puff blue. Like Nick, I want to see them on the field, but no one else in the Orioles farm system is going to do that. I think the Tides should do it with the wavy T logo. I think that would look great. But Aberdeen, for now, probably going to be the only Orioles affiliate out there wearing powder puff blue jerseys. So I want to check them out. I think Delmarva has generally done a good job mixing in orange jerseys every now and then. I like the Norfolk jerseys that Nick mentioned. And I think of the Bay Sox uniform, the orange one with buoy and black letters is my favorite. The Shorebirds and Bay Sox uniforms to me kind of look like the Orioles uniforms of the 90s and early 2000s. They're kind of similar in that respect. But yeah, I think that I really want to see those powder puff blue uniforms in Aberdeen in action next year.
I have to admit, Norfolk has a great batch of uniforms. I love the coffee stuff. Even their pink uniform really pops. You know, the green, the orange, it's all good. So I'll put them number 1. I do think that Aberdeen blue is going to look pretty good. Those uniforms look pretty nice. And Delmarva, I don't know. It doesn't. Maybe it's just the camera angle. It doesn't look that great on minor league TV, but Bowie's got to be last. It's a little bit boring. I do like their logo, like their hat, probably the best, but just overall look is kind of bland. So, and what were they wearing? Like some kind of blue with firearms. I can't remember. When we went and saw them, they had some weird alternate uniforms on. But yeah, that's how I'd go.
Yeah, the jerseys, minor league jerseys are fun though. Definitely love talking about those. Next question, another one from Vivek. Which of the batch of sophomores do you feel like will take a step forward and be a stable rotation starter? And he throws out the name Keegan Aiken, Alex Wells, Bruce Zimmerman, Michael Ballman, Dean Kramer, and Zach Lowther. So go with Zach first.
I think Ballman has the best chance of sticking the starter in that group just because the stuff is so good. I think he needs to build his repertoire back a little bit, which is why I expect he's going to start the season at Norfolk. But I think he has the best chance of sticking the rotation out of that group. Something tells me Aiken's going to end up in the bullpen long term. Zimmerman and Wells might trend the same way. Kramer, I really want to see a click for him as a starter, but I'm just not sure it's going to happen after last year.
I think Vivek is shortchanging Bruce Zimmerman, who did a pretty good job of being a stable rotation starter last year. Obviously, he missed some time, but I'm going to give Zimmerman a pass. And I think Bauman should still count as a freshman. I mean, what did he get? A couple games in. He's a redshirt freshman next year. So I think Alex Wells is my guy. I think he's going to take a big step forward. I think you looked at how great he pitched when he was in AAA, and it seemed like there was just like a little bit of a mental block making that jump up to the major league level. I think we're going to see him come out and really be more confident in 2022, get that pinpoint control that he's known for in the minor leagues back, and really impress some people and win a starting rotation spot out of spring training and hopefully maintain it the whole year. Aiken and Kramer, I'm not too high on. I think Kramer could still bounce. I like Kramer better as a starter still than Aiken. I think Aiken could be a decent reliever. And I think Zach Lothar will probably be like a nice 2-3 inning guy, nice swingman type. I'm not sure if he's ever going to make it into the rotation, unfortunately, but we'll see.
It's a vital question that I think the Orioles were hoping they would get more answers last year. But, I agree with Bauman. I think, fresh start with him in 2022. So I gave him a pass there. I got Zimmerman at the top of my list. I wish those injuries would have happened last year. I think he's a little underrated, and I actually think he can stick in a major league rotation. And I had to be convinced, but I think he's done a good job of convincing me. Kramer, I'd rank him third, but if it's up to me, his leash is extremely short. Last season just left this bad taste in my mouth. Lowther, I put 4 on my list, but I've said for a long time, I think he belongs in the bullpen. I think he'd be more successful there. So that's where I kind of hope the Orioles put him there after they just last year was a complete loss, and that was the Orioles' fault. I'll say that over and over again. Then I put Aiken 5, whatever. And I had Alex Wells 6, and Wells is weird for me because I'm actually reverse of Bob. Like he doesn't do it for me. He was one of my favorite pitchers to watch in the minor leagues, but when I think about Alex Wells, a major leaguer, it just doesn't do anything for me. Every time he pitches and somebody makes contact, I hold my breath and I get scared. It's gone. So I don't know. Again, I think I said this last year. Prove me wrong, Alex. And he kind of did last year, so maybe he'll do it again.
He's going to pitch till he's 45 like Jamie Moyer. You heard it here first.
Good.
So along similar lines, we have a question here from Brandon. What would you say is the best and worst case for some of the guys who struggled or were mostly absent last year? And he cites Mason McCoy, Rylan Bannon, Isaac Matson, Zach Lothar, Yusniel Diaz, and Brett Cumberland as examples. And I'll start with Bob on this one.
Oof. Okay. I'll go in order that he lists them in. McCoy, best case scenario, half the roster gets injured in spring training and he makes it as the last man on the bench. Worst case, he gets released. Rylan Bannon, best case, I want to save something for prediction episode, but I think he has a chance to make the team out of spring training. He had so much bad luck. I just don't even know what to make of his season last year. So I think best case, he just starts hot and kind of starts the way he had in that 2-week stretch, or maybe not quite that good. And could maybe, what's his competition? Kelvin Gutierrez at third base. Or maybe he starts the season in the major leagues. Worst case, he could be DFA'd in the spring. Isaac Matson, best case, he comes back, proves that last year was kind of a blip on the radar, wins a job in the bullpen to start the season. Again, worst case, I think it's potentially he could be DFA'd. Zach Lothar wins a starting spot in the rotation in spring training. Worst case, gets knocked around a little bit, starts back in AAA. I don't think there's that bad of a case for him. Yusniel Diaz, finally healthy, has an amazing spring training, wins a job. Anthony Santander is traded, and he wins a job at the Major League roster. Worst case, he's either traded or DFA'd. And Brett Cumberland, there's no Major League catchers, right? So, if the service time manipulations are still in play, all it takes is an injury or two, and he could be on the opening day roster. Worst case, he's still Brett Cumberland. That sounded worse than I meant.
Yeah, I just think Mason McCoy is fine AAA depth piece. I don't think you're going to get much more out of him. His AAA numbers, a 74 WRC plus and a 221 batting average. I was afraid that would kind of happen when he reached that level. So I think that is best case scenario. He's AAA depth. Bannon, I think best case scenario for him is that Kelvin Gutierrez hits like $115 and the Orioles decide to move on. They realize the defense just isn't worth it. And Bannon gets his shot at third base. But I don't think he has a long leash because he's already on that 40-man roster. And are the Orioles going to keep him around to use that spot for too much longer? Diaz, I think best case scenario, he stays healthy for 2 months. Just give me 2 months. I don't think he's been able to do that in 3 years, but stay healthy April to May, hit well, and the Orioles can trade him and salvage some value, because I'm not banking putting any money down on Diaz staying healthy for a full year. So if you can get 2 months, trade him. It's a win-win for everybody. Lowther, I just mentioned, future bullpen piece. Orioles didn't give an opportunity last year. It's pretty frustrating, in my opinion. Matson, I think, is just someone who everybody stopped talking about. We were really high on Matson. I think he was a top 30 guy, or just outside of our top 30 2 years ago, because he was a piece of that Bundy trade. It was closest to the major leagues. But again, he was on that Norfolk taxi squad a lot. I believe he had some personal off-the-field issues that probably set him back. More important than baseball, I think. So I think a fresh 2022 could be good for him. And Brett Cumberland, I think best case scenario is he catches on with another team, finds a home there.
Yeah, going through this group, I agree with both of you about Mason McCoy and Rylan Bannon. McCoy is good AAA depth. Bannon, if he can stay healthy and kind of regain his form offensively, I think has a shot to be at least a part-time player in the major leagues at some point early in the year. Matson and Lowther, I'm going to kind of group together here, because I do think that neither of them were able to really settle into a consistent routine last year, and that hurt their results. And though the taxi squad was necessary because of everything with the pandemic, I kind of hope it goes away this year, because developmentally, I just don't know that a player going on the road for 3 to 6 days at a time, not playing in games, I don't think that's better for them than being back in AAA, at least having an opportunity for regular innings out of the bullpen, or to take their turn in the rotation, or, for playing time. So I kind of hope that both of them get more normal routines in 2022. With Matson, we know that that's pitching out of the bullpen somewhere. With Lowther, I've said it time and time again, and I'll repeat it tonight. Just pick a role for him, groom him for that, and just see if he can be successful. If you think he's going to be a reliever, start working with that. Start working towards that now. If you want to see if he can stick in the rotation, I think that's a perfectly reasonable goal. Put him in the rotation. Put him in rotation at Norfolk or Baltimore. But regardless, make sure he's taking the ball every 5 days and has consistent opportunities. Diaz, I'm kind of split between where Bob and Nick are on this. I guess part of me still wants to see Diaz in an Orioles uniform, but then I also know, with his injury history and the fact that you now have Kyle Stowers, who is a better prospect, right there lined up for right field, I think anything you get from Diaz, as long as he is healthy, is the best case scenario. Worst case scenario, he gets hurt. He battles injuries this year, and at some point during the season or shortly after the season ends, he's DFA'd. Cumberland, the catching depth of this organization right now is a lot of 4A players and Adley Rutzman, and I don't know where that leaves Cumberland. So I feel like after the lockout, to see what the Orioles do with the 40-man roster at that position probably tells us a lot about their plans for Cumberland, because how many catchers, even if Adley Rutzman starts the year in the major leagues, how many catchers are you actually going to carry at Norfolk? And would you take Brett Cumberland over any of their free agent acquisitions, or Nick Sufel? I don't know.
Yeah. A lot of depth. We'll see how the catching situation shakes out. But all of those guys, I'm thinking probably except for Zach Lowther, I think this is it for a lot of those guys. They got one more chance. Lowther, I don't know. Again, like we've mentioned a couple of times, they don't know what they want to do with him, and it's frustrating. Another question here, Vivek, another one. What is your projection for Heston Kjerstad this year? Games, what level, batting average, on-base percentage, and home runs? Start with Zach.
I'll go somewhat, maybe it's conservative, I'm not sure, but I'll say it's going to be Delmarva and Aberdeen for his levels. I think he gets in a full season where he's healthy. As far as the specific numbers go, I don't know that I feel like I have enough right now to jump right in and say, Kjerstad's going to hit 20 home runs or he's going to hit 7. But I think that it would be, reasonable to expect some return to form with his power. I do think that I would not be surprised if we see him DH once or twice a week, just to keep him in the lineup, but reduce the wear and tear a little bit trying to come back from myocarditis. I don't know exactly how the Orioles are going to handle that. But my expectation is that he's going to have a healthy and productive year, and that he'll play at multiple levels. You'll at least see him at Delmarva and Aberdeen. In the absolute best case scenario, he gets in 2 or 3 levels and ends the year at Bowie.
I do think he's going to end the year in Bowie. It might be like a Gunnar Henderson thing where it's kind of just at the tail end and just to say that he got there kind of and give him that little boost. But I'll say he plays about 115 games, bats like 270 with a 350 on base and hits 18 home runs. Specific enough for you?
I was a little lower in all those. I said 110 games between Delmarva and Aberdeen, 260 average, 330 on base percentage with 14 home runs. Why not? Here we go. What's this?
Oh gosh, it's me. That makes sense. Yoni wants to know, knowing what you know now, would you still take Kjerstad at 2, especially with the less than spectacular starts that Emerson, Hancock, Asa Lacy, and Austin Martin have had? Nick?
I mean, I really did like Lacy coming into that draft. I still like him. But knowing what we know now, yes, I would still take Kjerstad. You just mentioned he could end the year at Bowie. I don't think that's outrageous to end with a week or 2 in Bowie. So and still be on track for a 2023 in the late 2023 or 2024 in the major leagues, if all goes right. And for me, it's look at the back end of that draft. Look at Carter Ballmer and look at Kobe Mayo. Do the Orioles get those 2 guys if they don't take Kjerstad? I don't know. So it's way, way too early. But for right now, I say yeah, still cool with it.
Yeah, I agree. I wouldn't do that over. I think that, Kjerstad lost last year, which is disappointing, but I still think there's real upside here. And like Nick said, that draft is, you got to put a lot of emphasis on the fact that the Orioles were able to go get Kobe Mayo and Carter Ballmer, who had really strong college commitments and were hard to sign. Some teams, I guess, viewed them as unsignable, and the Orioles were able to get them. So, yeah, I would take Kjerstad again, knowing what we know now.
Yeah, especially at the top part of the draft. There's actually some more interesting names towards the bottom for me, like Jordan Walker, Cade Cavalli, Justin Foscue, Mick Abel. There's some interesting guys, but or Zach Veen, Reed Detmers, like I talked about earlier. But Max Meyer, Asa Lacy, Austin Martin, Emerson Hancock. I don't know if they're really blowing you out of the water as far as like, oh, we should have got them. So yeah, why not stick with the guy we got who hasn't even had a chance to step on the field yet?
Sure. Speaking of another trade, I actually heard this on a Mariners podcast this morning. And so I threw it out there because it made me stop and think. I don't know about you guys, but the trade proposal was Matt Brash and Justice Sheffield for Kyle Bradish. And they were Mariners guys. They thought Bradish and Brash were kind of similar in terms of like ceiling and prospect status. And so they felt like no, because you're just kind of swapping prospects. So why move on from Brash? Keep grooming your own guy there. But from an Orioles perspective, it made me stop and think, like, is that a trade you're going to think about doing? We go.
I thought about this a little bit when I saw you post this question, and I came to like the same conclusion. I'm like, Matt Brash is kind of like Kyle Bradish, but just like a year behind. So I'm like, I don't know. And the Orioles are pretty high on Bradish, as we know, as am I. So. And Justice Sheffield, I mean, no offense to the guy, but he's had some injuries and some ineffectiveness. I'd rather kind of just stick with the guys that were that way for us last year and see if they can rebound. So I'll take the Kyle Bradish that's here a year sooner and stick with him. But it's definitely an interesting question.
Yeah, it is. And I feel like from the Orioles' perspective, you would have to really want Justice Sheffield, because I don't know that there's much separation from Bradish and Brash, other than what Bob mentioned, which is that Bradish is probably going to get to the major leagues a year sooner. Based off of what I've seen, I would have concerns about Sheffield moving from Seattle in the AL West to Baltimore in the AL East, and the injury history. So that's a deal I would probably pass on, but it is still an interesting hypothetical.
Yeah. I normally hate hypothetical trades so much. I refuse to come up with them. But I heard that one and it just made me stop and think. So I thought I'd throw that out there. But I think I'd agree with you guys on there.
So this one comes from Eric Garfield. Best case scenario for Carter Ballmer And what do we expect his 2022 to look like? We need another ace. I will start with Nick here.
Best case scenario for Ballmer, I think I said before that I think he takes a big leap this year. I don't know about you guys, but I had him on the back end of my top 30 just because he hasn't pitched in 2 years. He had no high school, no pro ball in 2020 because of the pandemic, Tommy John surgery in 2021. But you look at those pre-draft reports and they're promising. And I think when you look at pitchers in the system, Grayson Rodriguez, DL Hall, maybe Gene Pinto, those might be the only guys with a higher ceiling. I mean, you're talking best case scenario, highest ceiling. Those could be the only guys with a higher one than Carter Ballmer. So I don't know if that's bold, but I'm going to say that. So I imagine he gets eased back into things, though. A lot of starts in the FCL, probably most of the year in the FCL, maybe a cup of coffee to end in Delmarva, some 2-3 inning starts to end the year. But just like Heston Kjerstad, the Orioles are probably going to take it really easy on him, ease their way back in, ease both of these guys back in, because it's been a pretty brutal journey for both of them up to this point. So whatever we can get, I'm going to take it. I'm going to enjoy it. I'm really excited to watch Carter Ballmer pitch this year.
Yeah, I have to echo most of that. I think if you're talking absolute best case scenario, it's Gene Pinto 2.0. He starts the year in the FCL, dominates, moves up to Delmarva for a handful to 10 starts, continues to dominate there, and ends the year as like a top 15, 20 prospect in the system, according to us. So, yeah, I think that's very possible. But at the very least, just be healthy and pitch the season, and his potential is pretty high. So,
exactly. I just double checked. I had Ballmer 26 on my list. I think that a season right around what Gene Pinto had last year, which was 66 2/3 innings, could be reasonable, maybe a little lower because Ballmer is coming off of Tommy John surgery and really didn't pitch in 2020. He lost, I think he only had one outing his senior season. So he really has not pitched the last 2 years. So the Orioles should take it slow with him, and I think they're going to. But I think there's a possibility that he goes to the FCL, puts together a really good start, gets some time in Delmarva, even if it is, let's say, 3 starts the end of the year, and you're going into 2023 feeling really good about him as a guy that could move up prospect rankings quickly and who, in his first full season, might break out in a big way.
for sure. And before I ask the last question of the night, Dominic Corelli would like to know, who should the Orioles take with the first pick in 2022? Are we all in agreement?
It's only February, so I haven't picked my favorite yet. Stephen Loftus might change that next week. I definitely really enjoyed all the talk about Tamar Johnson. If he is that type of player that Ben Badler said he is, then it's hard to pass up. I will say that as much as I love the college guys, Brooks Lee, Chase DeLauder, Jace or Young, Jace or Josh, whichever one is in college right now. I'm kind of really excited about the idea of the Orioles taking one of the high schoolers with this extremely high ceiling, put him in the system, and let's have some fun with him. We played it pretty safe. I've enjoyed all the college picks, but we played it safe to build up this farm system. Let's start taking some chances, roll the dice a little bit.
Right now, I would say Tamar Johnson would be the Orioles pick and should be the Orioles pick. It is February, so my answer might change 5 times between now and the draft. But I would say Johnson, but as Nick said, a lot of high ceiling high school guys this year, plus some interesting college bats. And we'll get into this more next week when we have Stephen Loftus on. But there's really 6 names right now that I would feel okay with if the Orioles took them with the first pick.
It's Tamar Johnson. I mean, obviously, look, this is with what we know now. Obviously, the seasons haven't even started. College baseball starts this coming weekend or next weekend. So clearly things can change in a heartbeat, especially in that young of players. But from what we know right now, Tamar Johnson is a once in a generation type talent, according to Ben Badler,
and not just Ben. I mean, MLB Pipeline. Yeah. Who were the 2 comps MLB Pipeline had? I can't remember.
Wade Boggs and like Tony Gwynn mix or something.
Yeah, Vlad Sr.
Oh,
that's Vlad Sr. Yeah, it's absurd.
So yeah, I mean, underslot or overslot. I mean, I don't care. With this last chance, probably to have the first pick in the draft, unless you look at some predictions I saw that had the Orioles as the worst record again in 2022. But whatever. Yeah, I think I would do it. I would do Tamar Johnson. And again, that could change, but as of right now. And our last question comes from someone named Rob Raylan, who would like us to predict the Orioles' top 10 prospects this time next year. Just a fun exercise I wanted to go through with and force these guys to do as well. So let's start with Zach.
Is Rob Raylan the name that you use to check into hotels so no one can find you? Because that's really original.
It's very inconspicuous.
All right, so I want to launch this exercise, and this is my very, very early top 10 prediction for 2021. Number 1 is going to be Tamar Johnson. Number 2, Gunnar Henderson. Number 3, DL Hall, who I don't think is going to graduate in 2022, but will come into 2023 as one of the top pitching prospects in the game. Number 4, Kobe Mayo. Number 5, Colton Cowser. Number 6, Jordan Westberg. Number 7, Heston Kjerstad. I went with Connor Norby at 8th. I think the power is going to show up this year, and some of the really bullish, optimistic projections for him are going to be even more valid after a good 2022 season. At number 9, Gene Pinto, of course. He's going to have a big year again, and he's just going to continue to move up this list. And at number 10, I went with Michael Hernandez. I know it's only going to be the FCL, but a lot of people, both inside and outside the Orioles organization, seem pretty high on him. I think he's going to have a good year down in Florida. Maybe like Michel Deschamps last year, gets a brief cup of coffee at Delmarva to end the year. I was split between Deschamps and Hernandez at 10. And honestly, I could be persuaded that it should be Deschamps, but I'm going to stick with Hernandez.
All right, my top 10, looking ahead, I said number 1, don't throw things at me. I said Grayson Rodriguez. I'm going to say he doesn't shake the prospect eligibility this year. I'm looking at the Orioles' past history, their track record, all the craziness going on. I know I want him on opening day on the roster, but I think he sticks around for a little bit longer on the prospect list. So I'm going to say Grayson Rodriguez 1. Number 2, it's going to be 1-1, whoever that may be. 3, I do have Gunnar Henderson. I also have Henderson ahead of jumping DL Hall, who I have at number 4. 5, Colton Cowser. 6, Kobe Mayo. 7, Jordan Westberg. 8, Heston Kjerstad. 9, Connor Norby. And 10, Gene Pinto. Ballman, Stowers, Bradish all graduate as well.
All right. I did a top 15. Sorry. Number 1, Tamar Johnson. Of course. I think that's, if we take him, that talent is there. Number 2, DL Hall. I agree with Zach that he will not graduate this year. And Nick, you might have said that too. Sorry. I was a little distracted for a second. Number 3, Colton Cowser. Number 4, Gunnar Henderson. Number 5, Kobe Mayo. Number 6, Jordan Westberg. 7, Heston Kjerstad. 8, Gene Pinto. There we go. Number 9, Connor Norby. Number 10, Drew Rom. Number 11, Joey Ortiz. 12, Michael Hernandez. 13, Michel Deschamps. 14, Hudson Haskin. 15, Samuel Basayo.
I like Rom in the top 10. I considered him too. That's bold, and I like it.
Shout out to Prospects Live, who has Rom at number 10 right now. They get it. They're my favorite prospect list other than ours. You guys know what's up.
Vivek says, I wonder if Gene Pinto knows how much we love him. He does.
He does.
Don't worry about that.
He does. Trust me.
All right. So before we wrap up here, and I know we've been at this for a while, but Bob, Nick, any last minute questions come to mind here you just feel like throwing out just for the fun of it?
When does spring training start?
Yeah, I was going to say, how much longer until April? Was it 8th, the Tide start? Yeah, that was my question. I'm ready for this. I'm excited.
Spring training will start in the middle of March.
Yeah, I think if the season's going to start on time, they'd have to come to an agreement within the next week, which doesn't seem possible. So yeah, I think you're right.
Nick, you look like you want to say something like kind of bold and disappointing. Are you going to predict that the season's going to get canceled?
No, I froze for a second. I'm good now.
Okay.
We're all good. I got nothing to add. I'm losing more and more hope. Obviously, this season's not going to start on time. I'm just scared of how many games we are going to end up losing. I don't think there's going to be this last second. Here's a rush. We got to start. Let's crack this deal. I don't think that's going to happen. So I'm just looking ahead to minor league baseball, April 8th. Let's go.
Yes, and we are definitely looking forward to the start of the minor league season here at On the Verge. And no, we are not running out of things to cover this winter. As evidenced by the fact that we'll be joined next week by Dr. Stephen Loftus, who's kind of been a regular on this show since we started back in 2020. We know he's one of our listeners' favorite guests. He's going to be coming on to help us preview the high school and college baseball seasons. And we'll get into a little bit of draft lottery talk, too, with him. And as a programming note, we will be on Wednesday next week live. So if you watch this on our live stream, plan to tune in on Wednesday night, the 16th. If you listen to us on podcasts, check whatever the app you listen to your podcast on, either late that night or early the following morning, and our show with Dr. Stephen Loftus will be there. So thank you for listening to tonight's episode. For Bob Phelan and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to On the Verge.
Go Bengals.